everybody. Welcome back to Dad Space, the podcast for dads by dads. And I love when I get to have somebody on my podcast, not only once, but like also on my Living the Next Chapter podcast. Chris is here. Walking Away from the Ledge is the name of his book. And I love reading through this. Really, really great stories from Chris and his service to his country. And you feel like you're right there beside him the entire time as you're reading through this. Walking Away from the Ledge. Definitely go grab a copy. If you're serving, actively serving, or have served or know anybody, they need a copy of this book, for sure. It's a memoir from a soldier's perspective. Chris, thank you so much for this, for writing this book. I'm really enjoying it. Welcome to Dad Space. Glad to have you here, Chris.
Thanks, Dave. Really appreciate it. Glad to be back here again, chatting with you. It was fun last time. I'm sure it'll be fun this time.
All right. It's great. Chris, for the people who haven't met you yet from the other podcast, tell everybody where you are in this big world of ours.
I am in Huntsville, Alabama. Born and raised in Spokane, Washington. Never really left the Pacific Northwest until I joined the Army. And then after moving around to, North Carolina, Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee area, Hawaii, and New York, we ended up here in Huntsville, Alabama. And I've been enjoying it for the last 3 years. So we'll be here for a while longer anyway.
How long were you in Hawaii?
3 years. Yeah, it's a pretty, you can stay there a little bit longer, but it's typically a 3-year thing. So we got to hop around to all the islands while we're out there and have a good time. And luckily the girls were old enough that we didn't have to do like strollers and car seats and all that other stuff. They were, at least self-moving. That helped out a lot. But yeah, they loved it. They were our beach babies while we were out there. So we spent a lot of time at the beach and we miss it a lot.
Yeah. First of all, how old are your girls right now?
15. She'll be 16. Charlize, she'll be 16 in 4 months. So we got all the driving fun going on. She's getting better, thank goodness. And Izzy just turned 13. So we got 2 teenagers. With some of the attitudes that come with it, but we keep it in check. So, it's not anything disrespectful. We give them a little leeway, just enough to get themselves in trouble, but not enough that it goes to disrespect. So, we're trying to find that good middle ground in parenting.
So one of the things that when I have people on who have grown up in a military family is the whole moving around thing can be a superpower. It can be great because you can be a new person everywhere you go, or it can be something that people just dread, the idea of moving to a new community. How hard it was for your girls growing up to maintain friendships and do the normal kid stuff when mom and dad are moving so often? Was it tough for them?
No, I think mainly because it was the ages that we were at. And we were, so in Hawaii, we lived on post. So it was other military kids their age too, or military brats their age, as it's commonly referred to. Same for when we were up in New York, and just happened to be our neighbors there were all the same age. So they made friends real quick. And even now they keep in touch with them. But then I think it became more challenging that we got here in Huntsville because they're used to moving. And if they didn't make quick friends, it was kind of like, well, no big deal. We'll be moving and I can make new friends again. Or if they were having an issue with a friend, like Charlize was kind of having some issues with some friends here the last year. Last she informed me, they all kind of reconciled and whatever. But she was like, well, we used to move all the time. So if someone didn't want to be my friend, I didn't care because we were going to be moving and making new friends.
Interesting.
So, yeah. So I think the teenage years and that they're getting older and that we're not going to be moving anytime soon has kind of made it like hey, I got to, I don't know, play the game a little bit more, or kind of, just kind of, make a lasting friend and all that stuff, and not so much like overlook faults, but like, I don't know, find some neutral territory where they can kind of agree on. So yeah, but kids being kids, how they can just walk up and be like, you want to be my friend? And they're like, yeah, the older you get, the tougher that is. And especially coming to this area where it's not so prevalent of a military presence. There are plenty of military kids around, but it's not so big here as it was other posts. So a lot of the kids that they're in school with have been friends, have family, all that stuff in the area, for their entire lives. So, kind of integrating into that had been a little bit more challenging than when they were younger too. So it's something they're adapting to, and I think they're doing well now.
Good. Has your parenting changed now that you're home now and you're out of the service? Like, are you a different dad?
Yeah, and I think they would agree too. Initially, I was never like drill sergeant, right? Never like that, but there was definitely this like, this will get done at this time, that will be done at that time, or hey, just kind of not authoritarian, but there is, authority in the house, right? But I think realizing that I didn't want to be any type of harsh on all that stuff, or such a stickler for things. I've kind of pulled back the reins a little bit and just kind of let them loose a little bit more to try to get them to look around the house and be like, okay, this needs to get cleaned. And they're picking that up. I've had plenty of conversations with them about it. Like, hey, you live here too. This is your house. Take some pride in it, whatever. And if you see something needs to be cleaned up, go clean it up without having to be told. That kind of thing. And then trying to, like, especially with Charlize and driving now, I wasn't, when I was a Blackhawk pilot, I wasn't an instructor pilot, but we still had to instruct people on flying techniques and stuff like that. So trying to work with Charlize, I have to remember this is her first experience of doing anything like this. So,
Right.
take my time, be easy, and not be a default to like, well, what are you doing? Like, what was your, blasting at her or anything like that. But like taking that time to be like, okay, hey, here's why that's not going to work, or here's why you need to be careful, or, check this out, kind of thing. Unless we're about to hit somebody, then it's, like, get on the brakes. But just trying to take that extra time to be like, okay, none of these things are life and death situation, and let me handle this how I think, I would like someone to talk to me about it too.
When I watch those videos of new recruits on their way for their first day, everyone looks so scared on that
Terrified,
bus.
yeah.
And then these very loud people with really cool hats come busting onto this bus down the center aisle, and they're in like an inch from someone's nose, just full on screaming in their face. And then there's like yelling about your phones and yelling about this, and you're in the wrong spot. And I'm just like, my heart starts getting like, I get really nervous and sweaty watching these people. Like, can you explain to me, like, why is that so important to set the tone for what's going to be coming in your training? It's not like a summer camp where you just kind of roll in, get up when you want to, breakfast is whenever you want it. No. Like, is there a reason why it is so confrontational right from the beginning? And what was your first day like on the bus? Or like, can you tell me a little bit about your experience?
So I was kind of surprised I didn't get the in my face on the bus thing when we flew into Atlanta, and then we're on the bus down to Fort Benning, Georgia. And when we pulled in there, because it was like a Greyhound bus, it wasn't a school bus either. So, like you typically see in the movies, it's usually like a school bus. So it was a Greyhound bus. So we get down there, and they're like, all right, get off the bus, get over here, get your gear. And we're like, okay. And it's still kind of chill. And I'm waiting for that, experience and all that stuff. And then they took us to where we were going to be in the barracks, and they were like, hey, the dinner chow is in, like a half an hour or something like that. Cause I can't remember if we got there late, that detail I don't remember, but I was like, okay. And then, we went to dinner, and then the drill sergeant, he was pretty cool. He's like, all right, you guys will be checking, just doing your stuff at 9 a.m. So, like, get some sleep. So, okay. So just brushed my teeth and went to sleep. And then there was a lot of movement going on at like 6 a.m. and, some of the guys cleared out, and I was like, well, they said 9. So I went back to sleep, and a few minutes later, we just hear this screaming and yelling, do some push-ups here, whatever else. I was like, oh, it's getting real now, and that's And so I fell out of the bed into the like push-up position. I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm just like, he's like, I know I told you 9 o'clock, but to get down there now, you guys need to get there with everybody else. So that was our introduction to it. And then it was kind of, just like hurry here, hurry there, and everything else. And we really didn't get that whole screaming and yelling out experience until we actually got to our barracks where, after we got all of our gear issued and all that other stuff. Then we get the full on, our drill sergeants that we're going to have for the next 9 weeks. Well, it was infantry, so it was 14 weeks. And just you can do nothing right. And it's definitely to establish that authority. Like, it doesn't matter what you think, what you say, we're the ones in charge and we're going to be in charge. And you're not going to hear a kind word really for quite a while. And that's really it, to just establish that authority. And while you're asking me, that reminded me that there are still times where kind of sometimes that mentality comes back to me. I always called it Corporal Kruger, because when you're a corporal trying to become a sergeant, you're trying to prove to everybody that you're ready to be sergeant. So you're like on everybody, it just, you're trying to prove that you're ready to lead people. And just every now and then Corporal Kruger comes back. And just the other day, my daughter, Izzy, she kind of has the lingo and all that stuff. Charlize, she doesn't care much about the lingo the kids are using and all that. But Izzy does. And she was like, I said, so I heard about whatever, I forget what happened at school. I said, I heard about whatever today. And she goes, shut up. And she said it nicely. And I held back a little bit, but she said it nicely. And I was just like, you will never tell me your mother. And I was in her face. And I wasn't an inch, but I mean, I was a good foot from her face. I was like, you will never, and I was just like, okay.
3, 2, 1,
I was like, hey, that was a little bit of an overreaction, but now you understand. And then a couple days later, she said something similar, and she was like, nope. And I was like, do we need to revisit that conversation? She's like, no, I'm sorry. I was like, okay, cool. So, we were like there without having to have it, all that stuff. But sometimes, and that's one thing that's stuck with me, is sometimes it comes back real quick. But I'm like, okay, all right, I'm not in that situation, so I need to, kind of relax. But yeah, it's definitely to establish that authority and, kind of keep the peasants in line, or the privates in line,
Yeah, there you go.
As far as the army goes.
There's a kind of a related story I heard, and the reason behind it makes more sense when you hear it. But there was a dad out playing with his kid standing under a tree, and the father-son relationship was really tight. So whatever the father said, the son just did it. He didn't think twice. He just did what his dad said. There was no arguing. There was no debate. There was no, well, I don't feel like it. Shut up. None of that stuff, right? It was just immediate. That's just the relationship they had. The son's playing under the tree. The dad sees a snake lowering itself from the tree branch down towards his son's head.
Yeah.
Father says, hit the ground. The son hits the ground. There was no, and it was for his safety. The kid had no idea there was a snake above his head. But the dad saw it, saw the danger, told him what to do, and the kid responded immediately without hesitation. Is that kind of the idea in training for military, that there's no time to debate here? We're being shot at. There's potential that something bad's going to happen. There's no time to question or have a Q&A session. Just do what I say, right? Yeah. In that moment. Is that kind of a similar vein to why you're trained that way, to respond quickly and just don't debate, just act?
Yeah, they're definitely for safety as well. Because of someone with, experience, a sergeant's going to see that before a private will. And I think it also reinforces, if it was something like that, like, hey, get down, then you get that muscle memory, you get that mental thing to look out for later. So, it's also developmental at that point, like, oh, okay, hey, I understand this danger thing and all that, which is kind of also something happened with driving with Charlize. Someone got in front of us real close and then just started getting on the brakes, and I was like hit the brakes, and then they kept on the brakes, and I was like brake, and I wasn't yelling at her, I was kind of mad at what they were doing, and then they ended up not even turning or whatever anyway and just drove off. I was like, oh, we were just so mad, but I definitely didn't want her questioning me on that one and being like, well, I don't need a brake, I'm not too close. And then we were we were about half a car length, from, hitting them by the time, she was on the brakes and slowing back and everything. And then, I'm checking the mirror too, but she's just trying to keep the car straight. So yeah, definitely, safety aspect in there too. Absolutely.
Do your kids understand the training that dads had? Do they understand that what you have been shown? Like we talk about getting off that bus and they're yelling in your face. They're kind of like breaking you down to build you back up stronger. Yeah. I had somebody on the show from Ranger School, and that's what he said. They just tore me right down to my breaking point and then rebuilt me and then put me back as a leader within my team. But there's just this whole kind of deprogramming of all of your expectations of who you are. And then they kind of rebuild you, which is amazing. Do your kids understand the training that you have, or is that just a different version of you that your kids don't see? How does that work?
I'm not, I've never explained it to them that way. So if they've picked it up from something that they've seen before, now that you bring it up, it's probably something I'm going to have a conversation with them about a little bit anyway, too, because, we still have family dinners. So, we try and talk about things going on and stuff. This one thing we're definitely trying to hold on to and maintain in our family, but that'll actually probably be the conversation tonight. But I don't think they understand. They know I've done like a lot of physically demanding things, but I don't know if they're completely aware of the mental aspect of everything, that I've been through. And I've told them some stories. I told them about getting slapped around in SEER school, survival school there, and stuff like that. But I make it lighthearted and fun. I was like, oh yeah, this old guy, he slapped me a couple times, but he didn't slap me as hard as some people got slapped or whatever. And they're laughing about it, and they're like, well, what did you want to do? I was like, I just wanted to be done with it, so I took it. But I was like, I'm not fighting back. It's just going to make it worse. But so no, I think they're aware of some of the mental aspect, but they're more aware of all the like physically demanding things I had to go through with my time in service. But that's a good point. And yeah, definitely something going to come up in conversation now. So I appreciate that.
There you go. Well, yeah. So I feel like I'm there with you around the table for tonight's dinner. So that's good. I just think I don't know how I would, again, I have no point of reference to any of those because I haven't done what you've done. That's why I really admire what you do for your country, and thank you for that. Is I don't know how I could turn that switch on and off. Like a car pulls in front of you, hits the brakes. Where does my mind go in that moment? Yeah, because I've had people on the show, their mind goes right to Afghanistan, and slamming on the brake in that moment. I have one gentleman on, and he said he came back. He basically still had dirt on his boots from being deployed. He came home, got in his car and drove to the local bar where he's going to meet his friends. But coming back to the U.S., he was still thinking about where he came from. And you don't stop for red lights. So he blew through like multiple red lights. He got pulled over now that he was back in the U.S. And the officer came to the window and I saw him in his gear and went, "You just got back, didn't you?" And he was totally like freaking out because he's like, I don't stop at red lights, and just gun it. That's how he drove when he was there. And the officer had a lot of grace with him and said, listen, you're back home. It's different. Watch the red lights. Have a good night. He just didn't push it. But how do you take your knowledge, your experience and all of that and translate it back to a quote unquote normal existence back as a civilian? I don't understand how you mentally can do that. I don't know if I could. Yeah. Can you kind of unpack that a little bit?
It's definitely a challenge. I think, especially with my last years being in aviation, when we plan flying more than one ship, all the crews plan it together. So everybody knows what everybody's doing and we know our formation. We know when we're making turns, how sharp the turns are going to be and all that stuff. So when I'm driving along and, someone got in front of us and hit the brakes like that, they weren't doing, put it in that aviation flight aspect, they weren't doing what I was expecting them to do. And it made me mad because especially if we're flying, we're taking notes and we're like, hey, you turned this turn too sharp. You went too fast. You did this, you did that, so it's kind of, and then, you're also taking that critique. Oh, hey, you responded too quickly. slowed back too quickly. I had to slow back too quickly. The guy behind me had to slow back way back, and messes everybody up. So that's why we planned those details. So when I get cut out, it makes me mad because I can't go, hey, tell them, hey, here's what you did wrong in this drive. I can't get out of the car and do that. So for me, it's a lot more lately. I have been just kind of driving with the radio off, because I realize that traffic can be an issue. It's an issue for everybody, but I don't want it to take me to that place where I'm just so mad and then I get to where I'm going, or I get back home and now I can't not be mad because it was just someone who cut me off in traffic or someone who did that. So a lot more lately, I've been riding with the either the radio off or the volume down, and just really not hyper vigilant, but very aware, mirrors more, looking behind me or more, looking around me more. And also to be protective of my family, because, we have a lot of construction going on around here right now. They're trying to fix up the roads, which will be great when they're done. But we have just way too much going on. And, I don't want a drive to put me in that mode. So it's more of, how do I deal with it? It's more of being aware of it, and trying to take those steps to counter it. So that way I can just go and be like, okay, I'm going to be in traffic today. There's going to be construction. It's going to go down to a lane. 4 cars are going to pass me and cut me off, and just, so prepare beforehand, be ready for it when it happens. And then just be like, okay, we're all trying to get somewhere, and it's hard. It's hard to do sometimes, because every now and then I'm like, man, I'd really like a Humvee or an MRAP right now and just, run some people out of my way. But, or a helicopter to fly by these things or whatever. But yeah, just being prepared for it and prepping myself before I head out for it. And then with Charlize too, like, all right, she's going to make some mistakes. She's going to do something, but we'll get there. We got 4 months until she's driving on her own or whatever. So, we're going to get as much time as we can in every single day to get her, make sure I'm like comfortable that she's going to be safe, and safe driving her sister to school too. So that's the other aspect of it. So, yeah.
My friend, like you, he's a rider. He's got a Harley. Him and his wife are out for just a nice Sunday ride, just booting around, having a great time. And somebody cut him off, and he had to lay the bike down. And in that moment, out of fear, he's a very mild-mannered person. Like, when I talk to you, I see him. Like, he just seems to be, like, very cool and just kind of da-da-da-da-da. You haven't got angry with me once yet, which I really appreciate. But he's just this mild guy. You'd never bring attention to himself. But in that moment, when that person almost took him and his wife out, he went to a totally different place out of fear, sparked anger, and he went at the driver. Like, it was not like him at all. Like, people had to hold him back, right? Because in that moment, his wife was almost killed. He was almost killed or hurt severely by some stupid idiot who doesn't think about bikes in the moment. And fear changed to anger in like a millisecond. Just wham! He went somewhere. And he was angry at himself for getting angry, but then he was unpacking it in conversation. The two of us were talking that it was the fear part. The fact that he couldn't control the situation caused the anger to bubble up and explode. And he wasn't happy with himself, but he didn't know how to handle it. He didn't know how to deal with the fear and anger part. And I would think that part of your training is you can't be running around fearful, doing your job and flying a Blackhawk helicopter. You can't be doing this out of fear. And you can't be doing it out of anger, because now you're not thinking properly, right? In that moment, you have to have this training to kind of give you a baseline. Is that also part of your training, is how to deal with anger and fear when your life is on the line, potentially serving?
Yeah, it's definitely kind of shutting it off. I don't know if you got to the part in the book when I was at Fob Shank in Afghanistan. That was in 2012 and 13, and we were getting rocketed every day. And I was thinking back on it just the other day, and when I was infantry, and I didn't have a girlfriend, a fiance, a wife, and kids, in the progression of, that's pretty much how my deployments went. When I didn't have that, we didn't care, like whatever, I'm getting shot at, I'm getting rocketed. It didn't matter at all. But then by the time we fast forward to that, 2012 and 13 deployment, I had a wife and 2 kids, and I was like, well, I don't want to die in this country, like that's not what I want. But at the same time, still got this job to do and all that. So we kind of shut it off. It was funny. Me and a buddy were walking out to helicopter. This was in 2013 by this point, and the incoming alarm went off. And so I kind of, just went to move near a concrete wall that was, it was like 6 feet to our left or right. Well, my buddy was on the opposite side of wherever this wall was. So I went to move to the wall. He shoved me out of the way to run to the other side of the walls on the other side, because he just panicked. He just freaked out, panicked, shoves me, which kind of caused me to stumble just a little bit, and I tripped. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to go down right here because I'm kind of tripping anyway, and it's close enough to the wall, and I'll just get down. And he, and then he's leaving himself exposed while he's running to the opposite side anyway, in a panic. So, it was just, it's kind of that, some people are able to shut it down, I think, more than others, to where, there's like, oh, hey, there's gunfire. I have a gun. I'm going to run toward it, to where other guys were like, I'm going to get cover first and then get, make my way toward it to, and then to the, like, I'm running away because I'm, panicking and terrified. So, and you never know how you're going to react until you get into it. But there's definitely this whole, and it's not something, I think training helps, but I don't think you can fully train for it, how you're going to react in the moment. And maybe by that point it was also due to the amount of deployments I'd had, but yeah, there's definitely a snap judgment. And like when my daughter was driving too, I don't know if there was any fear of like crashing the car or it was going to harm us or anything, but I did go to Ed, afterward, and she slowed down. I was like, you expletives, and then I tell my daughter, and I'm like, none of that's directed at you. I'm just mad at what they did, and then drove off. And then I, took a deep breath, and I was like, okay. And like I said, it's still in there, it can come back real quick. So, but yeah, it's, like I said, I don't know if you can, if it was trained into me or just something that, was within me, or a combination of the both. So, it's just interesting to see. I can say it. It's interesting to see sometimes the reaction something gets out of me, because then something else will be like, yeah, whatever, I don't care about that. And they're like, really? I'm like, okay. So, yeah.
Okay. Now, I don't get to ask this question to very many people, so I'm going to take the opportunity to do so. Flying a Blackhawk helicopter, is there any like movies, TVs that are like relatively close to what it's really like to fly this, where you're like, you watch a movie and go, that's not even close to what it's really like. That's Hollywood. But this one's really kind of close. That's actually what it's like to fly one of these things. Is there like a game or something that's like relatively close that anybody could have like a kind of point of reference? That's a big machine. That's not your typical little, news chopper, weather and traffic on the nines. This is a little bit more of an upgrade than that. Is it like a big video game? Like what is it like?
It can be. It can definitely be like a big video game. I flew the Mike model, which has the full glass cockpit, as they call it. So it's all digital screens and all that stuff. So if we're flying just instrumentation, it's definitely like a video game or being in like a simulator. But I would say, as far as movies go that I could think, the first one that came to mind was the Predator. At the beginning, or near the beginning, when they're all flying in on those Hueys going into rappel in there, that's they were flying and they were kind of, it looked like they had some tail moves going on the whole time, so that probably just a little effect, like make it look windy or make it look cool, like they're cutting in these canyons or whatever. But them flying in a formation and all that stuff, they were pretty close and all that. That was that was the first one that came to mind. I remember we were soldiers once, or we were soldiers, whatever the title ended up fully being, that Mel Gibson one. I think somewhere they were flying into the valley in Vietnam, is where they were supposed to be anyway. And I think they were flying in a formation, and it was a straight line formation, and that would never happen because you can't see. It's harder to tell aircraft movement being directly behind them, so we're always staggered in some way, shape, or form. Because then you can see if you're closing on them. You can use like the wheels underneath to see, where you're moving, or the stabulator, the wing on the back, and all that stuff to see exactly, where you're at in position. And then when they're like, okay, we're going in, or what, I hadn't seen the movie and probably since I saw it in the theater, and they all just dive down one after another, like that's not how it goes. But so none of that flight that I remember from the movie was like any type of accuracy. But yeah, Predator, I mean, it's a good movie anyway. It's fun, action packed there. The beginning scene when they were in formation and then doing the rappelling, they were probably a bit higher than a rappel would normally be, but I don't know, those were tall trees too. So that was always a pretty good one right there.
So when you're sitting there in the air and you're not moving, you're just sitting there stationary,
just hovering.
Like how many pieces of your body are in motion to make that happen? Like say on some of, not maybe something so technologically advanced as that, maybe you say you started training on something a little bit harder at the beginning and work your way up to the nice stuff. But how many pieces of your limbs, your body are keeping that thing just from not moving at all? Because I see like the clips of like, there'll be like a skier trapped on a mountain in the snow, and they'll put the nose of the helicopter right there on the mountain, and they're just sitting there and people can get on and off, and they're just flying, but they're like facing the mountain. Yeah. And I'm like, holy crap, like how the heck do you do that? So like how much of your body are you using just to stay in one spot?
Yeah, so older helicopters, you would be using your feet and both hands. Yeah, you'd be doing everything and just minor adjustments to keep it right there. And you'd be watching that tip path plane in front of you. You'd be watching the nose kind of dip and come back, or left and right. You kind of find yourself a reference on the terrain out there, and you just lock in and you just adjust to kind of keep your sight picture, basically. The Blackhawk's a lot easier. It has a lot of systems in it to help offload the pilot workload. And so hovering's a lot easier. And mostly when you're hovering, say at night with night vision goggles on and all that stuff, you just hear a lot of, because the tendency is to like tense up and pull back. Mm-hmm. And so you hear a lot of drifting back or drifting aft from the crew chiefs back there, letting you know, like, stop coming backwards because the tail's back there and you're not doing anything without that tail. So
there you go.
But yeah, Blackhawk made it a whole lot easier. But yeah, with the training ones, you're constantly putting in some sort of input to maintain a straight hover there, and especially at 3 or 5 feet. I forget. I think it was like 5 feet we'd hover at, and it's just like, oh, I'm horrible at this. Well, I was anyway, so I was glad for the Blackhawk.
Well, for anyone listening, you're like, well, yeah, Dave asked the questions because we want to know too. From Walking Away from the Ledge, your book, Chris, that I'm really enjoying. What could we pull out of here for a dad that's reading this book? Is there some stories? Because the one thing you shared with me was your deployment and seeing your daughter responding to you leaving, and my heart just sank when we talked about that, you and I. But from your book, is there anything that a dad can pull out of this book that we can maybe learn from your lessons and what you learned as you served? Let's talk a little bit about the book and tie it into some dads that are listening to the show. Yeah,
so definitely, since we're talking about flight school, that works too. My wife was being a first-time mom. I was being a first-time dad and starting flight school and all that stuff. And so we found the easiest way to do it was not like, I think prior to that, we kind of had like, oh, you'll do this, I'll do that, and whatever. And so after Charlize was born and starting all that stuff, she also wouldn't sleep through the night. So we just established routines. So I would get home from flight school, just change real quick, help Jenny make dinner while she was, doing whatever with Charlize. or if I had to make dinner, period, then I would just, make dinner. And then it was, the rest of the routine from that, whether I was doing dishes and Jenny was giving her a bath, or we would kind of rotate that so we weren't both doing the same thing all the time. And then, trying to get her to bed. It would normally be Jenny trying to get her to bed so I could at least study a little bit of what we had learned that day from flight school. So I'd be, ready for the next day, because the first thing that they would be asking, we'd walk in there and be like, all right, they'd just pick a random, all right, Dave, stand up. And he'd stand up and be like, tell us the TGT limits, the temperature for the engine. Tell us the TGT limits for the TH-67, and you got to, rattle it off verbatim from the book and stuff like that. And then the next day it would be another thing and another thing. So, I would just say, hey, let's do all this stuff. I'll help you. And while you're trying to get her to bed, I just need an hour to study. And so we got in that routine, and there was usually like cleaning up. We had cats at the time, so cleaning up cat litter and all that stuff. So we had our routine of who was doing what or helping out with what. And then when Fridays rolled around, it was like, okay, something easy like pizza. And then Charlize was she was colicky, and then with that she wouldn't sleep. So unless she was attached to Jenny, then she would sleep, and then Jenny wouldn't sleep. So when Friday and Saturday rolled around, I was like, all right, just let me get the wrap or the baby, the whole carrier, whatever, and I would strap her to me so that Jenny could get a good night's sleep on Fridays and Saturdays. And then on Sunday, we'd get up, do our thing, go to church, come home, and I was like, okay, I just need like 2 hours of solid studying and all that stuff, So
right.
So that was like the easiest thing to do, was just to establish that routine. And then after flight school and get to our first unit, we had some time, but then Izzy was born and I was gone 2 weeks later.
2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks. So Charlize was 2 years and 8 months at that point. So she could walk, potty trained, all that stuff. So that helped out. At least, we didn't have back-to-back kids and then a deployment type of thing. But then Izzy's kind of started doing the whole not sleeping thing a little bit. Mm-hmm. So, and I was gone. But so she finally was just like, okay, forget about SIDS or any of this other stuff. She went in there one night and rolled Izzy over onto her belly, and she fell asleep real quick. And she said she put, and she was so concerned about it, she put, I think she said a bunch of blankets on the floor and slept next to the crib while she was on her belly.
Come on.
And then she goes, but after that, that's it. And she still sleeps on her belly. So she loves it. I'm like, well, we're not going to fight it. Bad back or later, I don't know, but we'll see about it. So that helped her out immensely. But yeah, that day I was leaving, that night, it was late. And I'm glad it was late, because then when I got on the bus, I got to kind of like look out the window without anybody seeing me, but we were in formation and we were getting ready to march out. And Charlize, she doesn't, like I said, 2 years, 8 months, she doesn't know what's going on. And she just sees me walk by and she's like, Daddy. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I did not need to see that. Well, it's even a little bit getting to me right now, remembering it. Cause I remember she was like, Daddy, just like she wanted to run out to me or something like that and get a hug or get picked up. Cause she's, Charlize, she's Chuck. She's my buddy too. We do a lot of stuff together now, but yeah, I was like, oh, like I can't look, I can't watch. I need to look away and all that stuff. And I kind of waved to her, just because nobody cared that we were like marching, but still, I was like, what, sweetie, or something like that. And we got on the bus, and I was by the window, and it was dark out, and I looked out the window, and I was like, all right, stay in my head, tears, stay in my head, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. So that became another kind of routine. Was after that one, I told her, I was like, that was too hard. If I ever have to deploy again, we're saying our goodbyes in the parking lot so we can have our emotional moment away from everybody else, and then I'll go in and just do this myself. And that I had 2 more deployments after that one, and that's what we did. I was like, I can't do this. And she asked on both of the deployments, she's like, you sure you don't want us to come in? I was like, yes, I do not want you to come in. Like, no, you're staying here in the car, because that was too hard. And it's and it was hard to shut that one off. It really was. But it's kind of got where we were going, and it was, it's the getting there that's hard, because once you're in it, you're working and you're busy, and all that. But by those times too, iPhones had really taken off. FaceTime was a thing, so I was able to stay in contact. So I think Izzy was able to, when I got home, it wasn't like, who's this guy, 9 months later. It was like, oh, I've seen you, kind of, I went to pick her up and give her a hug, and there's a picture, and she's just kind of looking at me, and then she just kind of leaned in. She wasn't Charlize. She was like, Daddy's home, big, huge hug, and just fantastic, and but Izzy kind of, she's looking at me a little bit, and then she just kind of leaned her head in on my chest, I think is what she did. And I was like, okay, well, I was, hey, I'll take that. So not a complete stranger.
When you're serving and you're deployed, how accessible are you? Like, I'm thinking back in the old days, you'd have to get a letter or something in the mail, but like your wife just can't pick up the phone and call you. You're anywhere, right? Yeah. And doing anything at that moment. Like, how hard is it for a message to get to you of something that's really important? Is that something people will come and track you down? How long is the delay? I have no idea how that even works.
Yeah. So because I was there in the invasion in Iraq in 2003. So at that point, it was pretty much. Some people had like cell phones that could connect to towers, but the connections were spotty at best. We had satellite communications, but you had to wait in line for the phone, and then it was this huge dialing process, and you only had 5 minutes because the line would be, however many people were waiting long. And then it was letters. Letters typically took 2 weeks at those earlier times, about 2 weeks to get in there. And that was pretty much it for my first 2 deployments. When because we got home in January 2004, we were right back to Iraq in November 2004. So we were only home for 8.5 months. They finally had phone trailers, but it was only, calling out, not calling in. But that was great too, because then, we just find the phone cards that you could load minutes up on and make phone calls. And it was the funniest conversation. So Jenny and I had met in between those deployments. And so we were talking and, still getting to know each other while I was on my second deployment. And I called her from the phone trailer one day, and they were notorious for just cutting out at random. And we were talking about kids, not like about having kids, but, I always had this joke. I go, well, how old do you think a kid has to be before you can hit him with the closed fist? Phone cuts out.
Oh no.
And I was like, she knows me at least enough that she's got to know I'm joking. So, I had all the phone card numbers to memory, so I'm frantically dialing it back, and I think it was like the 5th or 6th time I called back that she finally picks up, and I was like, I was joking, right? And she was like, yeah, I knew it was joking. She goes, but what a funny time for the phone to cut out, So there was that, and then in my 2007 to 2008 deployment, which was a 15-month deployment, we finally had a lot more sat phones, and they had a lot better signal. So we had 2 for our platoon, so I could call pretty regularly, but still, them calling us wasn't a thing. But then after I went aviation and went to Afghanistan, they had Wi-Fi on the fobs. We had Wi-Fi in the tents, so she could message me. And then if I wasn't anywhere near Wi-Fi, then when I got back to my room, it would just be like, ding. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So it got a lot more easy. And, some of the younger guys would be complaining like, oh, Wi-Fi's down, whatever. And I'd be like, let grandpa tell you a story when we had to, send letters and wait in line for sat phones. So they didn't complain around me or some of us older guys who had to go through that stuff. But yeah, I was grateful for it, because then, I could, get off a long, hard day, where like the most we could fly in a given day was 8 hours, or if it was night conditions, 6 hours, so after and there were plenty of days that went 8 hours, I just walked back in and plopped down on my bed, and I'm like, oh, I got a message. Cool. And then, being able to stay in touch, so that Izzy had seen me, and Charlize, to just to have a conversation with them all pretty regularly. And then it was a double-edged sword too, because then it was just like, okay, I just talked to them for the last 3 days and I got nothing, but they're still expecting me to call them, like, and I'd just be sitting there kind of like, you can stare at my face, but I have nothing to talk to you about today. It's business as usual. So I'd be able to hear their stuff and keep in touch that way. But, yeah, that was the progression of things. And, by the time it was at the end, it was Wi-Fi nearly everywhere. I mean, shoot, we were getting ready to take off for a flight and we'd still have Wi-Fi connection on the flight line. I was just like, this is nuts. Like, this is no longer a deployment. Let's just go home.
Yeah. There you go. So, Chris, for your book, where can we grab a copy of Walking Away from the Ledge? And can you kind of share, too, before we go, kind of the big idea behind the book for a dad that's going to read this, kind of your message to a dad when they get a copy? What is the book about?
Yeah, so Amazon will be the easiest place to get it. It's, just type it in, and I think it's still like the first thing pulling up there. And, especially for dads, reading about the challenges I had to go through with deployments and being away from my family for more just, training, deployments, all that stuff. You're not alone, and my wife and I will be the last to ever tell anybody this too shall pass, because we hate it here and that. Right. But, for everybody who's going through those struggles, who's going through those things, just hang in there, persevere. There is a way through it. And it's not gonna, I'd be lying if I said it was easy. But if you are committed to your family as a whole, and that's your driving factor, you can get through any of those things. And I mean, we're still here, and we don't hate being around each other. We love each other. We're still growing through all those struggles, everything that you read about in there. We just, and I think there's the other kind of underlying messages. There's a lot of forgiveness on both sides. Just not holding grudges against each other. So persevere through those struggles. Remember those reasons you're together, and there is an other side to it. It's just the challenge of getting there, but it's totally worth it on the other side. It really is.
Any message for the men and women listening who are maybe coming home from deployment? They're coming back home to their family. From one soldier to another. Any message for them?
Yeah, I think every time we were coming home, except for my last deployment, we always had these high expectations. We wanted to go do these great and wonderful things and see everybody and all that stuff. But one, not in a bad way. I know when we say like lower the expectation, that sounds like a negative thing, but bring the expectation down a little bit. Just expect to come home, expect there to be differences, but also expect it to be good, because family wants you around and all that stuff, but pace it. If you're coming home to your family and your extended family, parents, cousins, uncles, anybody wants to come and see you, just say, hey, I appreciate that, and I love you, and I want to see you, but let me get like a week with my family first, so we don't have the added stress. Because that was one of my deployments. I came home from, my mom was like, I want to be there, and it added a lot of stress to the situation anyway. It was like, I should have just been like, hey, I know you want to be there, and that's great, and I'd appreciate it, but hey, just let me have this time with the family first. Let me get settled back in before I got to try and figure out how to get you in there. And especially, if it's like bigger families, just be like, hey, I really appreciate it, and I want to see you guys too, but let's just back it up a little bit. Just know that I'm home and safe, and let me have this breathing room to be back home, because it's never, we all want it to be this like, I'm home and everything's great, and it just doesn't work like that. And unfortunately, it's not I'm home and I'm great. It's I'm home and I need to unplug and just kind of zone out some, or take a deep breath and all that stuff. So yeah, pace it and just bring the expectations down just a little bit. If you're going to go on that vacation, give it a week too. Just give it a week, kind of reintegrate and go for it. Yeah.
Amazing. Chris, thank you for the book. Again, Walking Away from the Ledge, The Soldier's Memoir. A great read. Anybody who would love to read this, it's really, really good. Well done on this. Again, I love the cover. I love everything about it. So thank you for writing this, Chris, and sharing your story with us and making time to hang out with a bunch of dads on Dad Space. I really appreciate you doing this. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Excellent, everybody. As always, go grab all the information in the show notes for Chris. And I'm sure he'd love to hear your thoughts about the book, too, when you buy a copy. Leave him a great review wherever you buy that book. And Chris would love to hear your thoughts. Again, Chris, thank you for serving your country so well and for being a great dad to these 2 girls. And looking forward to hearing many great things in the future for you as well.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Excellent. So thanks for being here. Thank you for listening to Dad Space. I really, really appreciate you being here. If it's your first time or you're coming back and back and back, it's great. Now, I am on a mission to talk to as many dads as I can through the show and connecting with you. You get to hear my voice by pressing play. I want to hear your voice by going to dadspace.ca and leaving me a voice message. I'd love to hear from you. And I'm on a mission to talk to 5 dads every month. 5 dads. 30 minutes maybe, tops, where we get together and just talk about maybe what you're getting out of the podcast, maybe how I can serve you in the content or with guests or topics, and just to hear from you. To hear from you as a listener would be outstanding. So go to dadspace.ca. There is a link right there where you can click on it and you can jump into my SpeakPipe link. It leaves a voice. You can leave a voice message, which comes to me in an email. I can respond to you directly in voicemail, or I can have you maybe even come on the show as a guest. It's completely up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with. But I'm here for you, and I'm so grateful that you're still here listening to this. So go to dadspace.ca and either let's get you on the show or let's you and I sit down with the calendar invite on my website and let's just have a conversation, one dad to another. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Take care.